Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator, for the inquiry. I won't belabor too many extra points this morning, but I thought it might be a good moment for the Senate to take a little bit of a pause and talk about an issue that is looming over this building right now. And actually, the House is actually in the process of taking action on this issue, and that is the process of redistricting.
Right.
There are, unbelievably, about to take a vote on a map over in the lower chamber that I think is completely out of step with the values and perspectives of the people of the state. But what's more disturbing to me is the dishonesty that is being spread about the redistricting process. And so briefly, I'd like to go over some of those major items with you, so that when the debate moves to this chamber, hopefully we aren't burdened by some of the dishonesty that's been spread in the lower chamber. One of the things.
Yeah, look, if the people in the if the Republicans in the Missouri House want to pass what we know to be a 5-3 map, they should be honest about it.
Right.
They should have the courage of their convictions. And I say, hey, I'm for 5-3 map.
Right.
But I think, yeah, you're about to lead me through a handful of inaccuracies bordering on outright distortions.
Right. Exactly.
I won't use the L word, but yes, I mean, the misrepresentation of the process, of the law, and of statistical realities just are mind-boggling.
You know, there's basically three areas of what I feel is dishonesty about the process that I'd like to touch on. The first is the idea that in order to enact a map, we must have an emergency clause amended to the legislation that we pass. In other words, it would take supermajorities of both chambers to come to an agreement on such a map so that it would go into effect soon enough that it would be applicable to the November election. But as is evident by when I describe a November election, the November general election is not until November.
Yes.
And so if we don't have an emergency clause on whatever bill passes both of our chambers, it will go into effect on August 28th, which is more than enough time, and this is per the Secretary of State's office, to have those maps active and in place for the general election in the first week of November. Now,
well, no question about that, Senator. And as of the day that the map that the map is passed and signed, every congressional candidate will know what the maps are.
Exactly.
And they'll be able to run in their districts. They'll be able to gather their data, knock their doors, get their volunteers activated, and so on. So, yeah, the idea that we will not have a valid map unless we have 2/3 of both chambers for an emergency clause, that was specious to begin with.
Right. Now, why is this dishonesty out there? I believe this dishonesty is out there because there is an attempt on the part of some of the members of the legislature that want to try to appease some of the minority elements within both of these chambers to get a more favorable map for certain special interests that, quite honestly, I don't think reflect the values and opinions of the people of this state. So, by saying that we got to have 2/3, even if it's not true, you are creating an environment that is going to push for a map that may not reflect what the people of the state actually want. So it's a dangerous dishonesty, and I wanted to take, that's the first of the three.
Well, and I think they almost had some of us going for a while, because what we heard a number of times as well, maybe we could have gotten 2/3 of both chambers back in, say, September, October, if only the governor had called a special session. But now a few members have left the Missouri House for various reasons. We no longer have a supermajority of Republicans in the Missouri House. So we've got to get a map that the Democrats will agree with too, and that's how we'll get the emergency clause.
Right.
And regarding the emergency clause, I would almost add, I don't know what the third read vote's going to go like today.
Right.
But yesterday on the perfection vote, the yeses on the 5-3 map, the yeses were only 84. Now maybe they'll get more on third read, but they're nowhere near the 2/3 of the chamber.
Correct.
So yes,
the emergency clause is about to become a non-issue.
Yeah, but that used to be
argument is going to be
argument number. That used to be argument number one.
Number one.
Yeah.
Number one. That's the first of the three dishonesties. Then there's the second of the three dishonesties, Senator, and that has to do with the idea that the court system, either the state or the federal courts, will step in and overrule the legislature's jurisdiction to draw these congressional maps. That's dishonesty number two. And I want to point out, Senator, I think you'll agree, the court system, the state and federal courts, have no jurisdiction to draw congressional maps.
They don't. They do.
And I'll tell you, every map that I've seen so far, whether it's a 7-1 or a 6-2 or the 5-3 that's going through the House right now, has complied with the Federal Voting Rights Act,
right,
has complied with all relative state regulations. So in that case, there is no jurisdiction for the courts to intercede and step in and try to draw those maps. If they do, then we have a question of a conversation about the separation of powers between the judicial and the legislative branch.
Yes.
And if we have to have that conversation, Senator, I'm ready to have that conversation. What about you?
Bring it on. Bring it on. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. That is the narrative we've heard over and over again. After first the bogus narrative about needing an emergency clause, now we have this bogus narrative about the courts drawing the maps for us. And yes, and again, the only jurisdiction, as you pointed out, under federal law would be the Voting Rights Act.
Right.
And that jurisdiction, of course, that law might stand for the premise that that CD1 is a majority-minority district,
right,
and therefore it cannot be dispensed with. It cannot be divided up in a way as to take that seat away from the Democrat who currently occupies that. Right. I think that's true. But not a single map I've seen drawn by the House, drawn by the Senate,
by Republicans or Democrats,
drawn by Republicans or Democrats, messed with that majority-minority district. Right. And therefore, that is the one legal argument. 7-1, 6-2, 5-3, none of them are a problem under federal law, under the Voting Rights Act.
That's right. Okay, so let me cover the third dishonesty. The third dishonesty that is being not publicly driven, but I think is privately driven, is that we have to have a fight about this. All right? And I have spoken at length.
That we have to have a what?
That have to have a fight about this. There's no need for a fight about this. There have been multiple compromises that I have seen floated on both sides of the partisan divide that would avoid most, if not all, of the fights that may take place in this chamber.
Right.
I have repeatedly encouraged our floor leader to look into those compromises so as to void unnecessary floor action here in the Missouri Senate floor into this date. Instead of doing that, we have put forward and got an endorsement by our floor leader of a map that very few Republicans in this state, I think, are going to agree with outside of this building.
Well,
so
and I
don't know why it has to be that way.
And I would add, Senator, that almost no members of this chamber have been involved in.
Right.
You and I both were appointed by the pro tem to the Senate Redistricting Committee.
Correct.
And yet somehow on New Year's Eve, the Friday of a holiday weekend, we had the House and the Senate Redistricting chairman announcing that they had a map that was fair and so on, and that it was a good map. And so I spoke to both of those members and asked them, like, look, what's the deal with this map? We haven't even neither the House nor the Senate has held a single committee hearing yet.
Right.
And I've been visiting with both of them for months about what I would like to see this map look like. And I think I said to both of them, I have the feeling the fix is in. And both of them said, no, this is just a placeholder. This is just a placeholder. It's going to be a subject of ongoing discussion, amendment in committee and on the floor. And because I expressed right away the concern that it was a 5-3 map. Right. And again, it was no, it's just a placeholder. It's just a starting point. We wanted to get something on paper so we know where to start. And yet, with the exception of a little fix for the city of, I believe it was Raymore, that map perfected by the House yesterday was nearly identical to what I called the fixes in map that was rolled out on 12/31. So it seems, I don't know who all was involved in that map, but it seems like a very small number of people. behind closed doors have written a map.
And potentially a consultant.
Well, I think consultants do have a role in this.
That's right.
I think it is. I think the consultants get in the room and they say, well, you got to do this, and but it is an end around of the democratic process and the committee process that we go through every 10 years, because I was not involved directly. I wasn't in the legislature 10 years ago, but former Senator Dempsey, former Senator Roop, both from our county, were very involved in that process. Good friend of ours, Speaker Tim Jones, was very involved in that process. And I've talked to people involved 20 years ago in that process. It wasn't like this. It wasn't like this. And so to justify the product of the House Redistricting Committee and to justify the process that has been used or abused, we've had this series of misrepresentations about the process and about what the law is.
Right. And the question is, why have we seen these series of misrepresentations? Well, the answer is because there are a couple powerful special interests backed by a couple powerful consulting firms in this state that want to see a particular partisan divide in those maps that actually is very outstep with what I think the people of Missouri want.
Yes.
So it's frustrating.
I think we are talking about a state that elects 2/3 of the members of both bodies of both legislative bodies, 2/3 Republican to both bodies. We have definite communities of interest that have been divided by this map, this 5-3 map. I just think we are looking. I keep coming up with new things to call it. I think it's the lemming map that we have lemmings ready to run over the side of the cliff to their own destruction.
Yep.
I don't know who's thinking and whose interests are being served by this map, but I know for sure it's not the people of the state of Missouri.
Senator, would you concur with the assessment that the people of this state, at a significant majority, want their federal delegation to push back on the agenda of Joe Biden in Washington, D.C.? Would you concur with that the people of this state want to push back on Joe Biden?
I think there's no question. It's not even close.
So why would a supermajority of Republicans in the House actually vote on a map that will increase support for the Joe Biden agenda in Washington, D.C.? Why would they do that? I mean, it just strikes me as bizarre.
It's bizarre in the extreme. It's bizarre in the extreme, and I don't get it. This is the 5-3 map that was perfected yesterday, and there may very well be a floor debate going on right now. It is the Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi map. There's no question about it. It's going to result within a couple of election cycles of Missouri sending 3 members of Congress to Washington, D.C., who are anti-life, who are anti-Second Amendment, who would vote for House Bill 1 to federalize and permanently enshrine election fraud into the laws of our country.
Yep.
Who would continue this COVID reign of terror that we have been faced with. Who on issue after issue, who would continue the war on affordable energy, continue to pass legislation that is resulting in inflation bordering on hyperinflation, that sell us out, our allies out abroad. So this, I don't know what consultants talk to what legislators to produce this Pelosi-Biden map that the House has in front of them right now, but it is not the people of the state of Missouri. I don't know what values are advanced by that map, but they are not the values of the state of Missouri.
Senator, one last thing, and I want to be respectful of the time of our colleagues. One last thing I'll ask you. Do you believe the type of appeasement that is being shown to these special interests that don't reflect the values of this state. Do you think that same type of appeasement is going to be shown by the majorities in other states when the roles are flipped between the partisan divide?
Well, Senator, that's not a hypothetical question. We already know it's going on. It's going on in California, it's going on in New York, it's going on in Minnesota, it's going on right across the river in the state of Illinois, where 2 Republican congressional seats are being drawn into, are being turned into Democrat seats. No, Senator, this is the Neville Chamberlain map. This is the peace in our day with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden map. I don't know how it's going to garner a single third read vote from a Republican in the Missouri House of Representatives. And I'll tell you right now, Senator, I will be disappointed with every House member, every Republican House member who votes for this map.
Very good. Well, Senator, I know that there are a couple of senators that need to take care of some business.
Yes.
I appreciate the inquiry.
Thank you, Senator.